rule to immediately consider Congressman Hudson's Stop 2 Act, critical legislation that addresses two issues that both sides of the aisle should be able to agree on: hardening for schools and active shooter training, law enforcement, and mental health funding. I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment in the record, along with extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
It's without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Republicans are committed to addressing the tragedy of these school shootings, but we cannot and should not impede the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. This is not a matter of Democrat or Republican. It is a matter of what is in the Constitution. Congressman Hudson's legislation is something we can pass right now, today, that will have immediate positive effects, keeping students safe while getting Americans the mental health resources they need. Many of these solutions are included in the bill we are considering under the rule, but Congressman Hudson's solution achieves the same outcome without infringing on our Second Amendment rights. To speak further on the amendment, I yield 10 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, the bill's sponsor.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to oppose the previous question so that we can immediately consider my bill, H.R. 7966, the Stop 2, Secure Every School, and Protect Our Nation's Children's Act. It's an honor to be here today. In fact, what an honor the people of North Carolina's 8th Congressional District have bestowed on me to allow me to be their representative here in the United States Congress. You know, as I walked the halls of this Capitol building this morning, I couldn't help but think of the great American patriots who have served here before us. And I think about the patriots that came before, who pledged their lives, their property, and their sacred honor so that we could live in the freedom and prosperity we enjoy today. People like Patrick Henry, who famously said, "Give me liberty or give me death." The courage of our founders, the faith, the strength of their convictions, the belief in an ideal, indeed an idea, that all people are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. And they devised a Constitution that protects and guarantees these rights. It's an incredible thing to think about. The legacy they have left in the hands of this, the 117th Congress. Each one of us swore an oath when we accepted this office. It wasn't an oath to a person or a political party. It was an oath to defend the Constitution. The issue before us today, what can we do? No, what should we do in face of the challenge before us, this epidemic of children taking the lives of other children in our schools? Every single one of us grieves for these lives taken. As the father of an elementary school child, my heart aches for the lives lost and the unimaginable pain and grief felt by those who love them. Neither party cares more about this. Neither political party has a monopoly on wanting to do something. That's why Republicans have come to the table with ideas that will actually get to some of the root causes of this violence. More than 12 pieces of legislation have been introduced by Republican members of this House to strengthen background checks, to improve law enforcement coordination and response, to address the mental health needs of our children, to make schools safer, and to prevent this violence. To date, my colleagues across the aisle have been unwilling to engage with us, to seek consensus, to work together to solve this problem. Just a few weeks ago, the majority party brought forth a package of gun control measures. This legislation targeted the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. This legislation did nothing to address the security in our schools. It did nothing to provide better mental health resources to improve the ability of school officials and law enforcement to intervene with these children in crisis. But it did let a lot of people around here feel better because they could go home and say, we did something. Over in the Senate, they aren't even considering this reckless package of bills. But Republicans and Democrats in the Senate did attempt to work together to find a solution. And there are many things that I like about this Senate legislation. In fact, I'm flattered that they use much of the mental health and school safety provisions for my legislation. But as much as we feel the need to do something to tackle this problem, we cannot forget that oath that we all took on the first day of this Congress. Our highest calling as member of Congress is to defend the Constitution. And that is where this legislation sent to us by the Senate falls short. This open-ended gun control legislation opens the door to federal funding of state red flag laws. First of all, these laws don't work. I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a list of 12 mass shootings that have taken place in states that already have red flag laws.
Without objection.
The state with the most mass shootings on my list is California. California has the most restrictive gun laws in America. California already has a red flag law. But more important to this debate, red flag laws subvert due process protections and threaten the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. Why would we agree to borrow more money that we don't have so that the federal government can give it to states to enact laws that don't work and that actually threaten the rights of our citizens? Why would we do that? Second, this legislation singles out law-abiding citizens under the age of 21 by giving the government discretion to delay for any reason their constitutionally protected right to a firearm, a right, by the way, affirmed yet again by the Supreme Court just yesterday. We all want to keep firearms out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them. And I'm willing to consider ways to better identify people with mental health challenges. But I cannot help but think about that 20-year-old paratrooper stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Our nation entrusts them to defend us with an automatic weapon or a multi-million-dollar weapon system, but we can't trust them with a semi-automatic weapon to defend themselves in their own home. What about their 20-year-old spouse back home in Spring Lake, North Carolina, alone because our paratrooper has deployed in service of our nation? Are we to tell this spouse that the government doesn't trust you to defend your home? Instead, we're going to delay your purchase for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, the government doesn't even have to get back to the gun owner or the gun store. Let that gun dealer decide if they want to take a risk on selling you this firearm while an FBI investigation is still open. No, this is a de facto ban on gun sales to law-abiding citizens under the age of 21. Third, this legislation also broadens firearm prohibitions for misdemeanors and nonviolent offenders. I think most of us can agree. Someone convicted of beating up their spouse ought to be put on the background check system. The law extends this to misdemeanor assault on a spouse or someone with whom you share a child. But we have to be careful when we're talking about taking away a constitutionally protected right over other misdemeanors. The language of this bill is so broad, it can include nonviolent offenders. And I'm concerned that the due process protections are simply not there. So what are we proposing today? Let's set aside these controversial, unconstitutional provisions that divide us. Let's unite around the idea that we're going to tackle the real causes of this violence. These school shootings are almost always done by a young male, often from a single parent or no parent home. They've experienced some trauma in their life. Most are likely on some behavioral medication. And they've shown plenty of signs of being in crisis. Yet effective intervention and mental health treatment did not happen. So let's start there. Today, I rise to propose we defeat this previous question and replace the Senate language with H.R. 7966. This legislation builds on the Stop School Violence Act, signed into law in 2018, by providing $1 billion in grants to hire more school resource officers. It provides $1 billion to hire mental health guidance counselors so that schools have the resources to intervene with these children in crisis. Imagine if we had been able to intervene with the shooter in Uvalde before he dropped out of high school. This legislation includes $5 billion to fund Stop School Violence programs to make schools safer, to provide active shooter training to law enforcement, and to better equip school officials and students and law enforcement to intervene before one of these students reaches the breaking point. This $7 billion is paid for by redirected, unspent COVID-19 funds that have already been approved. Also, under my legislation, schools can apply for a threat assessment to identify weaknesses in their security and to assess the mental health services at the school. We would also codify a clearinghouse at Homeland Security to collect and share best practices for school safety. These are practical, common sense solutions that we should all be able to agree will have a real impact. I agree with my friend. Now is our moment. Today, we can come together, Republicans and Democrats, and really address these issues in a meaningful way. And we can do this while at the same time keeping the promise made by the sacrifice and the courage of our founders, by upholding our pledge on the first day in office to defend this Constitution. I urge my colleagues to vote against the previous question so that we can immediately consider this important legislation. Thank you. God bless you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, let me just say a couple of words in response to the gentleman from North Carolina. He just said that Democrats and Republicans should come together. Well, they did. I mean, Mitch McConnell is a Republican. Lindsey Graham is a Republican. Tony Gonzalez is a Republican. I mean, Republicans and Democrats have come together like they never have before on this issue. I mean, so I don't really. Maybe my Republican friends ought to get together with their Republican friends and try to work it out on their side. But Democrats and Republicans have come together. And I'm having trouble with following the gentleman's logic when he basically implies that if we can't do something to stop all shootings, then maybe it's not worth doing anything. Nobody is saying that what we are doing today will prevent every shooting. What we are saying today is it will prevent some. What we are saying today is it will protect lives. And in the aftermath of Uvalde and Buffalo, people all across this country, regardless of their politics, were so horrified that they're demanding that we act. And again, as I said at the outset, I would have preferred that we do more. But I understand that we can only get done what we can get done in the reality in which we're living in here in the Congress. And in the Senate, you need 10 Republicans, to get permission to have a cup of coffee. Fact of the matter is, there is a process over there that has prevented even a debate on gun safety legislation because of the filibuster. But a number of Republican senators came together because they listened to their constituents, and I think they finally said, we have to do something. So, the idea that, no one's saying that this will stop every shooting, but under that logic, why do we have fire departments? We have fire departments if there's still fires. Why do we have seatbelt laws? We have seatbelt laws, and there's still people that get killed in car crash fatalities. I mean, the bottom line is we have them because they save some lives, and it's worth it. And then, I just have to say what is particularly ironic here. As I said at the outset, every item in this bipartisan package, there's been a hearing on at some point. I mean, none of these ideas are new. So there has been a process. But what I find particularly ironic is as we're being lectured about, we need more time, we need more hearings, the gentlelady says that we should bring up the gentleman's bill and consider it immediately with no hearings, with no process. I mean, I got whiplash just trying to follow the logic of my friends on the other side. But the bottom line is, as I said, this is, and we're either going to do something or we're not. And those who are arguing for delaying this more and more and more are the same people who will never vote for it. And so with that, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlewoman from Texas is recognized.
Let me thank the chairman very much and for the expeditious way in which the Rules Committee realized that we're in crisis Let me just start by saying, to stop the carnage and the bloodshed, I rise in support of the bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And since I know that this Congress has vision and it has passion to move as well the Protect Our Kids Act as we go forward in the future, I realize that this bipartisan effort is historic, particularly in light of the Supreme Court decision which took history and literally shattered the constitutional privileges of life and liberty by suggesting that laws that under Heller were legal could not be in place. The legislation that is going to come before us will, in fact, emphasize that we want to save lives. And so I support this effort going forward, because I want to say to the grieving families of Buffalo, the grieving families of Mother Emanuel, the grieving families in Uvalde, the parent who spoke to me just 2 nights ago, whose daughter bled out, that we are listening. I also rise today to support HRES 1132, which says to the world that the United States Congress calls on the government of Russia, the Russian Federation, to immediately release Brittany Griner. This bill was introduced by myself, Congressman Stanton, and Congressman Allred, because we realize this young woman who grew up and was born in Houston, Texas, who was a 2-time Olympian, who's a renowned WNBA player, is now wrongfully detained in Russia. She's had a prolific collegiate career and went to Nimitz High School and Baylor University. She is someone who has been known to be generous in her community by providing an outstanding program that helps young people. She has a heart and soul shoe drive. She's an American's American. We ask that you support this resolution 1132 to release Brittany Griner now. I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just wanted to point out to the gentleman from Massachusetts that the majority solely holds the power to give a bill a hearing, and I am sure I can speak on behalf of the gentleman from North Carolina that he would be happy to be granted a hearing on his bill, and would love to have that done, given that you are in control of those hearings. With that, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker, excuse me, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas.
Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the lady. Madam Speaker, it's a privilege to be here. This is a somber time. Yes, the Senate has sent us some over, again, that we never get to really look into before we have to vote on the House. I actually have a bill, H.R. 7909, that I think y'all would be interested in if I had gotten to speak to it in the Rules Committee this morning. It does 3 things. It says to our law enforcement retired professionals, if they want to get a part-time job as an armed resource officer with a school district, they don't have to pay Social Security, withholding taxes, FICA, none of that. The second thing that it does, so they don't get thrown into a higher income tax bracket. The second thing it does is it allows schools to hire an absolute professional, a retired law enforcement professional, at a reduced rate, because they don't have to match Social Security, withholding, and FICA. But third and most importantly, what it does is it gives the students and the teachers and the staff of that facility first-class armed protection in that school system and in that school district, so that when and if this happens, they've got a professional there. May 18th, 2018, it was a Friday. 10 people were killed in Santa Fe High School in my district. John Barnes, police officer, an armed police officer, was there within 3 minutes. He came around to approach confront the gunman, and the gunman pretty much eviscerated his right arm with a shotgun. Other police officers showed up quickly. We can do this with help to the school districts. We can get armed professional police officers there to help protect our school, the kids, teachers, and the staff. It doesn't have to be about violating the Second Amendment. It doesn't have to be about taking away gun rights. This is one simple thing. I would urge my colleagues to look at that bill, see if they're interested in it, because it's one way we can help. And with that, I thank the gentlelady, and Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I just want to take a moment to recognize and thank a longtime rules staffer who will be leaving us next week to head for the Department of Commerce as their Director of Legislative Affairs. Rose Laughlin, who is next to me, has been with the Rules Committee for 8 years, starting as an intern with the late Congresswoman and Chairwoman Louise Slaughter. Rose was Ms. Slaughter's right-hand woman, and Rose, I know that Louise is terribly proud of all of your accomplishments and all of your dedication to the people of this country. I think it's fitting today that Rose is here, because this will be her last rule on the House floor. But it's fitting that she's here because this is a historic measure, a historic bipartisan measure on gun reform that will actually make it to the President's desk. And no one on this committee has worked harder or more thoughtfully over the years for gun reform than Rose. So her dependable, resourceful, collaborative attitude has made this work easier for us all. And this institution and those we serve are better off because of her dedication to public service. And Rose, you always will have a home here at the Capitol. We're going to miss you, but we're excited about continuing to work with you in your new role. And we're very, very proud of you, and I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And we join the chair in wishing Rose the best in her future endeavors. So thank you for that. And I am prepared to close. Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Republicans want to ensure that our schools and communities are safe. But today, the lack of hearings, the lack of public input, the lack of procedure offends our duty to our constituents and our oath to defend the Constitution. And we are not willing to subvert constitutional rights of law-abiding Americans like this bill would do. There are solutions to prevent tragedies like we have seen without affecting law-abiding gun owners. We can pass those today, and that both sides can agree on. Unfortunately, the legislation provided under the rule attaches these solutions to unconstitutional and misguided policies that are, and I quote, a small step in the Democrats' broader gun control agenda. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I oppose the rule, and I ask members to do the same. I yield the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Minnesota yields. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I urge all my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, to vote for this bipartisan bill. Not that long. People have had it since Tuesday. It's been posted since Tuesday. As I said, it's not everything that I think needs to be done, and certainly it's not everything that we've passed in this House. But it's a start. And if we pass this and we send it to the President for his signature and it becomes law, it will save lives. And it's what the American people want. I have talked to so many families who have lost loved ones to gun violence. You know, I've watched the hearings in which grieving parents and brothers and sisters, you know, have talked about how horrific it was to lose a loved one to gun violence, begging us to do something so that no other family has to go through that. And for years, all of those pleas have fallen on deaf ears. You know, when we've even tried to get anything done here, modest legislation, we've sent it over the Senate, and we couldn't get the 60 votes to even have a discussion on the Senate floor. That just changed. And it changed, I think, because people are so horrified about what just recently happened, but what's been happening time and time and time again in this country. And I think the question for everybody here is not about, does this violate the Second Amendment, or is this taking away guns from lawful gun owners? It's not. That's all garbage. It really is. That's not what this is about. You know, I get it. The gun lobby is making phone calls and threatening to hold back checks if people somehow don't frustrate this bill so that it can't get to the president's desk? God, we were elected to help people, to protect people. And if we, and in the Senate, we have this remarkable bipartisan collaboration. And in the House, there are Republicans who have supported sensible gun safety legislation. I hope this is an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote in the House. I know that it may not be because the leadership here has urged Republican members to oppose this. I regret that very much. But, when people say that this is somehow, a kind of left-wing bill, I mean, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, give me a break. This is a truly bipartisan bill. It's a compromise. And to suggest that, we need more hearings on a bill, on a compromise that every single topic in this compromise has had hearings on before, to suggest that we do that by people who don't want this to move to begin with, come on. So this is the, put up or shut up movement for people here. We're either going to do something or we're going to do nothing. We've been doing nothing for years. And, I urged early in my opening that, that people think long and hard before they vote. Consult your conscience. I can't go back and talk to parents who lost loved ones to gun violence and say, we tried, but it wasn't perfect, or, I could easily go back and say, I wish it were bigger and it were more, but so it's not perfect, so I'm not going to support it. I'm supporting this because it's something, and it's going to save people's lives. So I urge all of my colleagues to please support this. I urge a yes on the rule and a yes on the previous question. I yield back the balance of my time and move the previous question on the resolution.
The gentleman from Massachusetts yields. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of adoption of the resolution. This is a 15-minute vote. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Speaker Macbeth, as the member designated by Louis Gohmert of Texas, John Carter of Texas, and there's one, I can do this. We'll do Paul Gozer of Arizona. That I informed the House they will all vote no on the previous question, and I'll be back.
Purpose does the gentleman from Texas wish to be recognized?
Speaker Macbeth, as a gentleman authorized by Brian Babbitt of Texas, I inform the House that he will vote no on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado wish to be recognized?
Speaker Macbeth, with great reverence for you and your service, and as the member designated by Ms. Porter, Ms. Strickland, Ms. Hayes, Mr. Keating, Mr. Rush, Mr. Swazi, Mr. Jeffries, Chairman Jeffries, Mr. Krishnamurthy, Ms. Underwood, and Mr. Gottheimer, I inform the House that these 10 members will vote yes on the previous question. That's how you...
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek to be recognized?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Representatives Wasserman Schultz, Kristen Lawson, I inform the House that these members will vote yea on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Albio Series, Ms. Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Mr. Donald Payne, Ms. Ann Kirkpatrick, Mr. Mike Doyle, Ms. Lizzie Fletcher, and Mr. Bill Pascrell, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on the previous question.
The gentleman from Indiana seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mrs. Wolarski from the great state of Indiana, and pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mrs. Wolarski will vote no on the previous question.
Okay, where's she from? Purposes the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Doug LaMalfa of the great state of California, I inform the House that Mr. Revolta will vote nay on the previous question.
From South Carolina seek to be recognized.
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. William Timmons of the great state of South Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Timmons will vote nay on the previous question.
For what purpose? For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek to be recognized?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Katko of New York, I inform the House Mr. Katko will vote nay on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Rice of South Carolina, I inform the House Mr. Rice will vote nay on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Hampshire seek to be recognized?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Frankel, I inform the House that she will vote yes on the previous question.
Does the gentlewoman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Victoria Sparks from Indiana, I inform the House that Mrs. Sparks will vote nay on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Takano and Mr. Bowman, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Jacobs of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Jacobs will vote nay on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Congresswoman Boebert and Congressman Heiss, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Congresswoman Boebert and Congressman Heiss will vote nay on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As member designated by Mrs. Vicky Hartzler from Missouri, I inform the House that Ms. Hartzler will be a no on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
As the member designated by Congresswoman Presley, I inform the House that Congresswoman Presley will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Georgia seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Johnson of Georgia, Ms. Bush of Missouri, Mr. Carter of Louisiana, Ms. Sharfilis McCormick of Florida, and Ms. Wilson of Florida, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Caston of Illinois, I inform the House that Mr. Caston will vote yes on the previous question.
From? For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Good morning, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Mr. Rod Whitman of Virginia 01, I inform the House that Mr. Whitman will be voting no on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Brown of Ohio, Ms. Stansberry of New Mexico, Ms. Bernice Johnson of Texas, and Mr. Moulton of Massachusetts, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on the previous question.
What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
As a member designated by Mr. Barr of Kentucky, I inform the House that Mr. Barr will vote no on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman? For what purpose?
As the member designated by Mr.
For what
Jimenez.
purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Jimenez of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Jimenez will vote no on the previous question.
Purposes, the gentleman from California seek recognition.
As the member designated by Representative Manning of North Carolina pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Representative Manning will vote yea on the previous question on HRES 1204.
The gentleman from California seek recognition.
As the member designated by Representatives Danny Davis, Tlaib, Jayapal, Allred, and Cardenas, I inform the House that these members will vote aye on the previous question.
For what purposes, the gentleman from California seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as member designated by the following members, Bordeaux, Costa, Barragan, and Espaillat, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purposes, the gentleman from Texas seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Taylor, the great state of Texas, inform the House that Mr. Taylor will vote no on the previous question.
For what purposes, the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. McEachin, Mr. Cohen, Ms. Bonamici, Mr. Auchincloss, Mr. Chuy Garcia, Ms. Newman, Mr. DeSaulnier, and Ms. Moore, inform the House that these 8 members will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
The gentleman from Florida seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Cawthorn of North Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Cawthorn will vote no on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Khanna, I inform the House that Mr. Khanna will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Guest of Mississippi and Mr. Palazzo of Mississippi, I inform the House that both Mr. Guest and Mr. Palazzo will vote nay on the previous question. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Ms. Salazar of Florida, I inform the House that Ms. Salazar will vote no on the PQ.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Dr. Van Drew of New Jersey, I inform the House that Dr. Van Drew will vote no on the previous question. Additionally, as a member designated by Mr. Hal Rogers of Kentucky, I inform the House that Mr. Rogers will also vote no on the previous question.
On this vote, the yeas are 218 and the nays are 204. The previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota wish to seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of the House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Rod Whitman of Virginia, I inform the House that Mr. Whitman will be voting no on the present rule.
What purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
As a member designated by Mr. Bowman and Mr. Takano, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on House Resolution 1204.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mrs. Sparks from Indiana, I inform the House that Mrs. Sparks will vote nay on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Caston of Illinois, I inform the House that he will vote yes on HRES 1204.
Purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. William Timmons of South Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Timmons will vote nay on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
As the member designated by the Honorable Ayanna Pressley, I inform the House that Ms. Pressley will vote yes on HRES 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Dr. Van Drew of New Jersey, I inform the House that Dr. Van Drew will vote no on the rule. Additionally, as the member designated by Mr. Hal Rogers of Kentucky, I inform the House that Mr. Rogers also will vote no on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Georgia seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Carter of Louisiana, Ms. Sharfilis McCormick of Florida, Ms. Wilson of Florida, Mr. Johnson of Georgia, and Ms. Bush of Missouri, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on HRES 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Taylor, great state of Texas, inform the House that Mr. Taylor will vote no on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Speaker McBath, as a member designated by Mr. Brian Babin of Texas, Mr. John Carter of Texas, Mr. Lee Gorham of Texas, I inform the House that they will all vote no on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, is the member designated by Ms. Bernice Johnson of Texas, Ms. Stansberry of New Mexico, Ms. Brown of Ohio, and Mr. Moulton of Massachusetts, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on HRES 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Guest of Mississippi and Mr. Palazzo of Mississippi, I inform the House that both Mr. Guest and Mr. Palazzo will vote nay on the rule. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
As a member designated by Representative Manning of North Carolina pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Representative Manning will vote yea on HRES 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Ms. Salazar of Florida, I inform the House that Ms. Salazar will vote no on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Representatives Danny Davis, Tlaib, Jayapal, Allred, and Karnes, I inform the House that these members will vote aye on HRES 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Congresswoman Boebert and Congressman Heiss pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Congresswoman Boebert and Congressman Heiss will vote nay on House Resolution 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Auchincloss, Mr. McEachin, Ms. Moore, Mr. Cohen, Mr. DeSaulnier, Ms. Bonamici, Ms. Newman, and Mr. Chuy Garcia, I inform the House these members will vote yes on HRES 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As member designated by Mrs. Vicky Hartzler from Missouri, I inform the House that Ms. Hartzler will vote no on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Hampshire seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Frankel, I inform the House that she will vote yes on H-Res 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Jimenez of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Jimenez will vote no on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Albio Series, Ms. Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Mr. Donald Payne, Ms. Ann Kirkpatrick, Mr. Mike Doyle, Ms. Lizzie Fletcher, and Mr. Bill Pascrell, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on H-Res 1204.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. LaMalfa of California, I inform the House that Mr. LaMalfa will vote nay on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Representatives Wasserman Schultz, Christ, and Lawson, I inform the House that these members will vote yea on H.Res. 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mrs. Walorski from Indiana and pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mrs. Walorski will vote no on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Porter, Ms. Strickland, Ms. Hayes, Mr. Keating, Mr. Rush, Mr. Swazi, Mr. Jeffries, Mr. Krishnamurthy, Ms. Underwood, and Mr. Gottheimer, I inform the House that these members will all vote yes, proudly, on H-Res 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Katko of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Katko will vote nay on the rule, and as the member designated by Mr. Rice of South Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Rice will vote nay on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Chair, as the member designated by Mr. Khanna, I inform the House that he will proudly vote yea on H-Res 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Jacobs of New York, I inform the House that Mr. Jacobs will vote nay.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congress members Bordeaux, Costa, Barragan, and Espaillat, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on H-Res 1204.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
As a member designated by Mr. Barr of Kentucky, I inform the House Mr. Barr will vote no on the rule.
On this vote, the yeas are 217, the nays are 203. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to the adoption of House Resolution 1204, the Senate amendment to H.R. 4346 is considered as agreed to, with an amendment consisting of the text of the Rules Committee print 117-53 and House Resolution 1132 is hereby adopted.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1204, I call up the bill S2089 with the Senate amendment to the House amendment thereto and have a motion at the desk.
Clerk will report the title of the bill, designate the Senate amendment to the House amendment, and designate the motion.
Senate 2089, an act to amend Title 38, United States Code, to ensure that grants provided by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs for states' veterans cemeteries do not restrict states from authorizing the interment of certain deceased members of the reserve components of the armed forces in such cemeteries and for other purposes. Senate amendment. Mr. Scott of Virginia moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment to the House amendment to Senate 2089.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1204, the motion shall be debatable for 10 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Education and Labor or their designees. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott, and the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on the legislation currently under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're here again to pass legislation to ensure that our nation's children have access to healthy meals. The Senate amended the bill that we passed yesterday, and so today we're going to accept that amendment, and so the bill can be forwarded on to the President for signature. S2089 would maintain school meal flexibilities that do not increase costs, continue flexibilities to support summer food programs this year, provide additional support for child and adult care feeding programs, and increase school meal reimbursement rates for the upcoming school year. We know that this bill alone will not end hunger in America, nor does it uphold the stronger provisions in the bill that the House passed yesterday, but it is an important step to take for our nation's children and fulfill our basic responsibility to keep them from going hungry. I want to thank the gentlelady from North Carolina, the ranking member of the committee, Dr. Fox, for cooperating and making sure this legislation could come to the floor, along with the senator from Michigan, Ms. Stabenow, and the senator from Arkansas, Mr. Boozman. I urge a yes vote on the motion and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate my colleague from Virginia yielding time. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this is essentially the same bill we passed overwhelmingly yesterday, except it was improved by our colleagues in the Senate. This bill is a more targeted approach that includes temporary support for students and schools. It puts an end to the permanent pandemic narrative that led to unnecessary federal programs with little return to taxpayers. For more than 2 years, broad nutrition waivers provided free meals to everyone, including wealthy families. This legislation returns these programs to regular order. Most importantly, this bill is fully paid for. It is an example of respecting taxpayer funds, something the federal government is in short supply of. Simply put, This bill puts our school nutrition programs back on track so taxpayers, schools, and students are better served. I urge my colleagues to support this bill and yield back my time.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman has the only time remaining. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that Congress has reached its deadline. We must pass this critical legislation to ensure that children have healthy meals this summer and that schools and daycares have the funding and flexibilities they need to respond to the supply chain and high food costs in the future. If we do not act, we would jeopardize children's access to nutritious meals. So I wish again to thank the ranking member, Dr. Fox, for her cooperation in bringing this bipartisan, bicameral legislation to the floor, along with Senators Stabenow and Boozman. I urge my colleagues to support S. 2089, support the motion, and I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired pursuant to House Resolution 1204. The previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1204, I call up the bill S. 2938 with the Senate amendments to the House amendment thereto, and I have a motion at the desk.
The clerk will report the title of the bill, designate the Senate amendments to the House amendment, and designate the motion.
Senate 2938, an act to designate the United States Courthouse and Federal Building located at 111 North Adams Street in Tallahassee, Florida, as the Joseph Woodrow Hatchett United States Courthouse and Federal Building, and for other purposes. Senate amendment. Mr. Nadler moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to the House amendment to Senate 2938.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1204, the motion shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary or their designees. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, and the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on S. 2938.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I would be remiss, Mr. Speaker, if I did not comment on the decision of the Supreme Court just minutes ago to revoke the constitutional right to abortion, a right that millions of Americans have relied upon for half a century. And worse, Justice Thomas has indicated that this is merely the beginning of a radical right-wing effort to roll back other rights, including the right to contraception, the right to marry whomever we choose, and the fundamental right to privacy. And we should observe that the same justices telling us today that questions about reproductive rights must be left to the states told us just yesterday that the states cannot be trusted to regulate modern firearms, weapons that were never dreamed of by the framers of the Second Amendment. History will prove these activists wrong on both counts. But today, Mr. Speaker, we take a historic first step toward ending the epidemic of gun violence in this nation, the only developed nation with this problem. We come to this moment after the tragic loss of so many innocent lives, 10 African Americans in Buffalo targeted because of their race, 19 young students and 2 teachers in Uvalde just a few days short of their summer vacations. Scores more lost in other mass shootings too numerous to mention, and over 100 more Americans killed every day in gun violence that never makes the headlines. No piece of legislation can ever bring these lives back. No legislation can make their families or their communities whole, but we can act to keep others from facing the same trauma that they have endured. A few weeks ago, I was proud to bring forth the Protecting Our Kids Act, which took a bipartisan and comprehensive approach to ending gun violence. I am pleased that the Senate incorporated portions of that bill into their own legislation. I wish there was more. I wish we could say we were doing everything we could to prevent another parent from losing their child to gun violence. But I am proud that we're making an important start today. This cannot be the last step, but we also cannot let another day go by without taking action to make our communities safer and to keep even one more family whole. Recently, I have turned to a particular teaching in the Talmud. Whoever takes one life, it's as if he kills the entire world. And whoever saves one life, it's as if he saves the entire world. This legislation includes provisions that will save many lives. Like the Protecting Our Kids Act, it includes funding to implement extreme risk protection laws and a prohibition on straw purchasing. It also strengthens background checks for those under 21, makes more sellers responsible for conducting background checks, takes steps to address the boyfriend loophole, and provides significant funding for programs that will make our communities safer. Today, we will send legislation to the President's desk for the first time in decades that will make progress toward ending the scourge of gun violence. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and I reserve the balance of my time.
New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself, excuse me, as such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, let me first say God bless the United States Supreme Court. And God bless President Trump for the people he selected for our highest court. Today's decision is a win for the Constitution and a win for the sanctity of human life. June 24th, 2022, a date that will be remembered for a win for the sacredness of human life. Now, this bill. Mr. Speaker, the rights spelled out in the First Amendment and protected by the Second Amendment are why the United States is different than every other country. It's why we're special. It's why we're the greatest nation in history. For 18 months, the Democrats have attacked our First Amendment liberties. Today, they're coming after our Second Amendment liberties, and who knows what it'll be tomorrow. I can only imagine. My guess is, in light of the decision yesterday from Justice Thomas, the decision today from the court, my guess is they're going to look to pack the court. Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Democrat chair of the Judiciary Committee, has already introduced legislation to pack the court. Might be amnesty for the 2 million illegal immigrants who've come into our country in the Biden administration. They've told us they want to end the Electoral College, end the filibuster. Who knows what it'll be tomorrow. But today, they are coming after Americans, law-abiding American citizens' Second Amendment liberties. Understand what this legislation does. This legislation tells states, someone who doesn't like you can report you to law enforcement or to a judge. There will be a hearing where you can't be at, your lawyer can't be at, you can't confront your accuser, you didn't commit any crime, but they can take your property. They can take your gun, they can take your guns, they can take away your Second Amendment rights. And then you have to petition to have a subsequent hearing where you get them back. That's what this legislation does. And understand this, and this is so important. This is not being done in a vacuum. Understand what we have seen from the left and how they have weaponized a government against their political enemies. 12 years ago, it was the IRS targeting conservatives. 6 years ago, it was the FBI spying on President Trump's campaign. More recently, it was the Department of Justice using counterterrorism measures against moms and dads. Just a few weeks ago, the Department of Homeland Security set up the Disinformation Governance Board. Going to chill everyone's speech. Today, they're coming after your Second Amendment liberties. Here's the good news. Here's the good news. Yesterday, the Supreme Court got it right. They got it right when it came to the Second Amendment. We should celebrate that, and we should do everything we can. I hope this doesn't pass. It seems like it's going to, but I hope it doesn't. And I would urge a no vote, Mr. Speaker, and would reserve the balance of our time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished Speaker of the House, Mr. Pelosi.
The distinguished woman of the House, Speaker Pelosi, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding and thank him for his extraordinary leadership in bringing this very important legislation to the floor. I commend you, Mr. Chairman, as well as Mr. Mike Thompson, the chair of our Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, and so many others who have participated in some of the elements of this legislation. I rise, Mr. Speaker, in support of the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, a strong step forward to combat America's epidemic of gun violence and to protect our precious children. As lawmakers, we share a sacred responsibility to keep our kids safe from harm. But according to new data from the CDC, guns are the #1 killer of children in America, more than car accidents or cancer. Our hearts remain shattered by the rampage at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, as they do from the massacre at Sandy Hook and in countless other communities across the nation. Indeed, we know these schools could have been in any one of our districts and have been in some. Those families could have been any one of our neighbors and have been, and those children could have been our own. All of us who have met with survivors in the wake of the tragedies have heard their message loud and clear. We must do something. Today, in their honor, we heed their powerful cry, sending the major gun violence prevention legislation to President Biden's desk for signature. And we send it to the President for his signature with gratitude for his leadership on this important issue. He was the author of the Brady Law in 1994 and has been a champion ever since. This legislation, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, includes several strong steps to save lives, not only from horrific mass shootings, but also from the daily massacre of gun crime, suicide, and tragic accidents. As included in this package are two major provisions which we have championed here in the House. First, this bill includes significant investments to help states establish extreme risk protection order laws, otherwise known as red flag laws. Thanks to the leadership of Representative Lucy McBath, who has been our inspirational leader on this subject in our caucus and in this Congress, and Salud Carbajal, these provisions will keep deadly weapons away from those who pose a threat to themselves or to others. Secondly, this bill takes strong action to combat straw purchases, a cause Congresswoman Robin Kelly spearheaded in our chamber. Although we hear about the notorious mass murders every day on our streets of our country, murders take place. Doing so will make it illegal to buy a gun on behalf. This is the Robin Kelly straw purchases piece. Doing so will make it illegal to buy a gun on behalf of those who cannot legally purchase it. If I can pass the test, I buy the gun. And then I sell it to you, and you can't pass the test. Straw purchase, very dangerous. This bill addresses that. That's a giant step. This package also includes additional initiatives that will help reduce the danger of gun violence across our country. We are moving toward closing the boyfriend loophole, a victory, to help protect survivors of domestic violence and to stop abusers from acquiring a gun. This has long been a priority. We are strengthening background checks for potential buyers under 21, which would have applied to the 18-year-old gunman at Uvalde. And we're making enormous investments in mental health programs, school safety programs, and community-based violence prevention initiatives. I mention all of these, Mr. Speaker, because, of course, I have to say that this bill doesn't do everything we would like to do. We need to do more on background checks. There's some other language that we like to do in terms of background checks, not only on guns, but perhaps on high-capacity armament. But I say to my colleagues what I frequently do, but it applies here now more than ever. Let us not judge this legislation for what is not in it, but respect it for what it does. And what it does is save lives. And we're very, very proud of that. So again, I thank Chairman Nadler Gun Violence Protection Task Force, Chairman Mike Thompson, for their determined leadership in bringing this legislation to the floor. This package represents the most significant action to prevent gun violence in nearly 3 decades, and it is a necessary step to honor our solemn duty as lawmakers to protect and defend the American people. Importantly, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act has earned strong support from gun owners, gun survivors, and law enforcement alike. Gun Owners for Responsible Ownership endorsed our bill, saying, "We write today as responsible gun owners, but above all else, we are proud parents and grandparents of toddlers, students, and young teachers. We want them to be safe." Every Town for Gun Safety wrote that this common sense legislation addresses every form of gun violence. And the Fraternal Order of Police and the International Associations of Chiefs of Police applauded our bipartisan agreement, calling it a giant step forward and one that will save lives. I repeat, a giant step forward and one that will save lives, the statement of the Fraternal Order of Police and the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Indeed, keeping our children safe is a unifying issue for our country. It must be a unifying issue in this Congress. Yesterday, our nation watched in horror as a radical partisan supermajority of the Supreme Court ruled to flood America's streets with even more deadly weapons. It is unconscionable that as America reaches a fever pitch of gun violence, this court has chosen to create a new right to bring guns into public spaces while hindering the ability of states to stop the bloodshed. In doing so, the GOP supermajority Trump-McConnell court is implicitly endorsing the tragedy of mass shootings and daily gun deaths plaguing our nation. But with this bipartisan package, we take the first steps to fight back on behalf of the American people who desperately want new measures to keep communities safe in the high numbers in the polling. Our Democratic House majority has again and again passed landmark legislation that would combat the scourge of gun violence, and we will never give up in our fight to save lives. Mr. Speaker, our fight to prevent gun violence is of, by, and for the children. Of the children because they are suffering. It's heartbreaking that in America more children die from guns than any other cause. By the children because they are leading. We see the children marching in the streets, testifying before Congress, demanding action. And always for the children, building a future where every child can reach his or her fulfillment free from the fear of gun violence. To the members who lack the courage to join in this work, to those who lack the courage to join in this work, I say your political survival is insignificant compared to the survival of our children. And today we will prevail for the children. I urge a strong bipartisan aye vote for this life-saving legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what saves lives. The decision we got from the Supreme Court today saves lives. This bill takes rights away from law-abiding citizens, their Second Amendment liberties. That's the key distinction. I yield 2 minutes to my friend, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Speaker Pelosi just lectured us. She said guns are the #1 killer of children in America. That's not true. Abortion violence is the #1 killer of children in America until today. There's no right to abortion in the Constitution, and thankfully the Supreme Court finally said that decisively, thanks be to God. There is a right, however, a crystal clear right in the Constitution to keep and bear arms. But here we are today. Congress is moving full steam ahead to restrict the right to self-defense for law-abiding gun owners and the right to due process for all Americans. This legislation is the wrong approach, and we ought to oppose it. In our Judiciary Committee markup several days ago, Some of our Democrat colleagues here on the floor today openly said they don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about its protections. They want to overlook that. And this bill does that. It's a perfect example of members of Congress simply ignoring the Constitution. President Biden and his administration are already disobeying laws that we have on the books to revoke firearm dealer licenses over simple clerical errors. This legislation is going to make that worse. This is not going to help anything. It's going to lead to more errors, more false flags, more backlogs in the NICS system. There's nothing in this bill to fix that. There's nothing in this bill to increase school safety. See, we want real solutions. We think that we ought to harden the schools, real physical improvements to help protect children, but that's not here. They didn't have time for that. 2 weeks ago, I had a very moving conversation with Pastor Y.J. Jimenez. He's a pastor on the ground ministering to the people of Uvalde community who have suffered such an unspeakable loss. He said something that was really clear, and I think it's echoed throughout America. People paid a lot of attention to it. He said, you know what? We need to address the root causes of all this bloodshed. He said, America's problem is not guns. America's problem is a heart problem, and he's exactly right. We're seeing today the results of decades of decline in the secularization of American society and the open assault on our institutions, family, religion, morality, the breakdown of law and order. We see the results of all this on young people, in clinical settings, in schools, and everywhere else. We want to do things that matter. It's not more gun control. It's not more federal laws. It's not more intrusive government. We have to address the root causes. I will yield back. This is
gentleman from Ohio reserves.
Reserve.
And the gentleman from New York is recognized. Gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, a member of the Judiciary Committee, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
I stand here in the name of Mr. Garza, whose daughter in Uvalde bled out, Buffalo, Tulsa.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. See how to figure out someone's got it together. Well, try being out here yesterday. We make it this way, you know? There's no way to pizzeria for a reason. And where do we go? Yeah, you can go in there, but you have to do the whole